Hello everybody and welcome into another video in our series, A Season in the Greenhouse. I am Kirk Simpson with Atlanta Carnivorous Gardens. This video we're actually going to be talking about dividing, and I apologize if some of the takes seem out of order or sliced up kind of awkwardly. I'm still getting the hang of video editing and making everything make sense. But I think this is a really important video for anybody that grows a lot of Sarracenia and wants to learn how to divide them. We are in, I think it's November 22nd right now, so we're getting into late November. This is a good time of year to do it. Ideally, you could do it a little bit earlier in the fall, but I talk more in depth in the video about the ideal time period to be dividing your plants. But this is still a great time of year to be doing that, especially when things aren't really growing and they're starting to slow down for dormancy. It's a good time to be thinking about next spring and getting things ready for that. So again, I wanted to go through kind of what dividing is and why it's so important to so many growers. So if you grow Sarracenia, and if you watched our previous series on growing Sarracenia from seeds, then you know that growing a Sarracenia from seed is sexual reproduction. So what you are creating when you grow a Sarracenia from seed is a genetically unique plant. So similar to people, you might have different features, you might look like your parents, but you are 100% unique and your own genetics, right? So if you have special plants and you want to make more of them, if you grow seeds from those plants, they're not going to come out the exact same as the parent, just like you didn't come out the exact same as your parents, right? So this is a very important way to create more of a very special plant that you might have grown from seed or you might have purchased and want to create more of. So dividing is a great way to do that. It's also an important part of winter maintenance. If you have kind of overgrown plants that are getting crowded in their pots, it's important to get them out and divide them and give them a little bit more room. If you have things that have grown into kind of weird clumps where they're kind of crowded and growing on top of each other, it's an important part of maintenance as well. And it's just the most efficient way to make more plants, right? I would say of our sales plants here at Atlanta Carnivorous Gardens, probably 90, well, maybe not that high, but a lot of them come from dividing. We do grow a lot from seed here, but like I've mentioned in my previous videos, that's a 4 to 5 year process sometimes. So if you can divide your plants, if you have large plants and you want to create more, this is by far the most efficient, easiest way to do that. And I'm going to show you, if you have a large plant, just how many plants you can make from that. In one example in this series, we'll talk about a single 1 gallon plant that was a little bit overgrown, and I was able to divide it into 10 plants. And some of the other examples, I'll show you my specimen mother plants where I didn't divide it as much as I could have. But some of those big specimen plants I could divide into as many as 20 to 30 plants. So it's a really efficient way to create more plants. But I really hope you enjoy this. I remember when I was starting out that dividing was a little bit intimidating. It kind of feels like butchering your plants. You're not really sure if you can do it, what's a good time of year to do it, how to treat the roots, how exactly to go about it. So I thought it was time to go through a video where I show you in depth where you can see. I will probably end up splitting this into 2 videos because some of the takes that I've taken so far have gone pretty long. As you can tell, I can be a little bit long-winded, but I think it's important to explain everything at play. So I'll probably split this into 2 videos with 3 different examples of plants that I'm dividing, so you can get a good feel for a number of different things that you might encounter as you're going through and dividing your plants. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer those. Best way to reach me is you can try to put something in the comments. I may or may not be able to see that. I just don't check those as often as I'd like to. You can always reach out to me on social media through Instagram or Facebook or email. I'm happy to answer any questions you have and help ease your mind as you're going through if you're thinking about dividing for the first time. Well, with that said, I hope you really enjoy this video. I'm going to be creating more videos throughout the winter, just really enjoying this greenhouse and showing you guys what we're going to be doing over the winter. Thanks for watching. Just around dividing and repotting. So I thought that would be really helpful. I'm probably going to go through 2 to 3 examples of different sizes and setups of plants just to kind of walk you through and make sure you get a really good overview of how I go through this. Dividing in the fall is a great time to divide. We still have a few more weeks of warmth where the plants can recover from that division and grow new roots and get established and ready for next spring. If you don't get to it in the fall, doing it in dormancy is also a great option. Just getting it done before kind of the next spring gets going. The plants may have a little bit of a setback as they try to adjust and grow new roots. Of course, if they're doing that in the heart of dormancy when it's freezing and cold, but they'll recover just fine. I do that all the time, and the plants handle it just fine. Another option is in the spring. I don't recommend that one quite as much. but it can definitely be an option, especially in kind of in a pinch. The reason I don't recommend that is, you just never really want to be disturbing your plants when they're in active growth. In the spring is when they're in their most energetic, ready to get up and growing. And if you take a plant and divide it in the middle of that, you risk kind of disturbing that root system and getting that plant off to kind of a poor start for the year. That said, you can definitely do it, and the plant will survive and probably grow just fine. You just might not experience quite as good of a year one as you would if you divided that same plant in the fall. And then as far as dividing in the summer, definitely don't recommend that. It's just so hot. Plants are kind of starting to get stressed around that time of year because it's so hot, and they're trying to keep their roots nice and cool and focus on producing nice leaves so they can photosynthesize and do everything that they do. Doing it in the summer is definitely going to be the most disruptive for your plant. That said, any season you really can divide a plant and get away with it. Just in those not so recommended seasons of spring and summer, you might have to baby the plant a little bit more, and you might have to be willing to accept that the plant is just not going to recover as quickly, not going to look as nice as quickly. That said, the next season it should still look totally fine and get back to growing the way that you're used to. You might just have a temporary setback to deal with. So with that said, my first example here is an extremely mature specimen. This is one of my mother plants. One of my favorite plants in the entire collection. This is called Sarracenia super heavy veins. This is a hybrid from Phil Felizi. He's a really well respected breeder out in California. I know him personally. He makes awesome seeds, and his hybrids are absolutely top notch. Some of the best stuff that you can get. And super heavy veins is no exception. It's this really beautiful Morii, which is a flava crossed with a leucophila. That just has, as you would imagine, these really cool distinct veins, and the pictures can get totally solid red, really nice shape. They can get up to 3 feet tall, as you can see here, very tall plant, and just vigorous, beautiful, everything you want in a plant. And for that reason, I have it in a nice 4-gallon pot here. You can see just how big it is, but this plant has fully filled in this specimen-sized pot. So it is time to either repot it into a larger pot or to divide it. So I'm going to take some divisions. I'm not going to totally break it up into, I could probably divide this into about 10 different plants if I was really motivated to. I'll probably just take a couple divisions and then put the plant back in this nice pot so I still have a nice specimen mother plant next year. But definitely, like I said, once we get this plant dug up and you can see a little bit better, you'll be able to see that there are plenty of growth points in here where you could divide this over and over again and just create a lot of plants. So like I mentioned, we're in kind of mid-fall right now, so plants are starting to go dormant. You can see all these nice pictures that are starting to turn brown. And what I should have mentioned at the first of this, the first thing you're going to want to do if you're going to be dividing or repotting or performing winter maintenance on a plant that's going dormant is to give it a good trim. You're going to kind of have to anyways before we get to spring. You can see these pictures are holding on pretty well, but still going to have to trim them back. My philosophy is to try and leave as much green on the plants as possible, especially the pictures. You'll see as I trim these up that a lot of them will still be filled with insects and things that the plant is digesting and using to grow. I just have a philosophy that generally you want to try and leave as much green as possible, but anything fully brown can go. These Phyllodia, these non-carnivorous leaves here, I try and leave some of them. It would be ideal to leave all of them, but it just gets kind of messy, so I am going to trim probably about half of them out. And then anything brown all the way to the base will be trimmed away. In the pictures, I'll probably trim them to about yay high, just so they can keep the green. Oh, you see our tree frog jumping from one plant to the other. But just so they can keep a little bit of green and continue to digest any insects that they've captured this year. Okay, so as you can see here, the plant has cleaned up considerably. I've trimmed a lot of things away from the plant. You can see here my trash can. I've been able to clean things up considerably. One thing I should have mentioned when we were going through trimming is that your number one consideration anytime you're growing any kind of mature or large Sarracenia should always be airflow. Especially down here in the south where we have high humidity, we deal with rot and fungus a good bit, so you always want to be considering airflow. And really what you want to be doing is kind of opening the plant up, allowing that air to flow over, allowing the sun to get in at the base of the plant, and continuing to just open things up and just think airflow, airflow, airflow. Every time you're trimming or dividing or maintaining your plants, you really want things nice and open, and that's going to prevent a lot of those issues you might run into with fungus, rot, really just pictures that are flopping, things that are getting shaded out. You really want to reduce congestion and just really consider airflow every time you're trimming. So basically, as I've trimmed this plant, let me make sure I'm staying turned towards you so you can hear me. My number one consideration is anything that's flopped over needs to get trimmed all the way down. You can see this is a pretty healthy leaf, still plenty green on it, but it's flopping over, so I need to trim it because I don't want it spilling out into other plants and constricting airflow and just leading to a wet, kind of stagnant environment. As I'm going through here, I'm also thinking about leaves that are kind of winding and flopping around and really restricting airflow at the crown of the plant here down at the base. Anything that is really restricting that needs to get trimmed. But once that is complete, you should be able to see a plant that looks like this. And if you look really closely in here, you can see that most of these leaves are vertical. The base of the plant is mostly exposed. I do leave a lot of green on here, just like I talked about, for photosynthesis. Gives the plants kind of something to do in the winter. They have some leaves so they can continue photosynthesizing, and also offers some winter protection before we get into our hard frost. Just leaving some vegetation on the plant and not trimming it completely bare right before winter when we might get into the 20s or the teens. Just kind of cuts down on a little bit of that frost exposure. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this plant out of the pot. We'll get a good look at the root ball, and I'll go through the next steps with you then. Okay, so how's that for a root ball? So I very gently tried to take things out of here, but it was just too heavy. It kind of fell out of the pot. But what you can see is very well developed root system, lots and lots of growth points on this plant. And what you can see is as we come to the edge of the pot and the plant starts to push against those edges of the pot, you can see it's starting to grow down into the soil. You do not want that. What's going to happen there is the plant is going to continue to burrow itself deeper and deeper and deeper. I've even seen plants push through plastic pots and crack them open, but it's going to keep doing that, and it's just not good for the plant to be buried that deep. It really doesn't want to be. So anything like that where you can see the growth point starting to push up against the pot, we need to take care of that. Whether it's repotting it and giving that growth point some more room to spread out, or dividing it and just creating a new plant that way. There are two primary methods of how I repot, and to be totally honest with you, the first method is the one I do the most, and I call it lazy division. So when I'm going through and dividing, I don't really worry too much about washing the roots off and giving the plant totally fresh soil. I just kind of open the pot up, I find a nice clean growth point. I'll even take scissors, or I'll just snap it with my fingers if it's easy to do, and then I'll pot up two plants that way. That's the lazy way. I don't wash off the soil, I don't expose the plant and look at all the different growth points and decide where the best division would be. The next method is probably the better way to do it, but it takes more time and effort, so that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. And so we're going to rinse this plant off, we're going to get all the soil off the roots, expose what the actual rhizome looks like, and from there you'll be able to see all of the different growth points. You'll be able to see what the rhizome looks like bare. You'll be able to get a really good clean look at it, and once we do that, you can make some decisions on which growth points will be the easiest to divide, will affect the plant the least, have the best root system. That's why that's preferred, just because you can see kind of everything when you do it that way. But the lazy way is the way I do most of my plants, and it works just fine. It just is not quite as not quite as robust as washing off all the soil and getting a nice clean look at the plant, giving it totally fresh soil. Okay, so now we're a couple days later. Didn't get to this quite as quick as I wanted, but I'm ready to show you kind of how we're going to go about dividing this large specimen plant here. So let me go ahead and pan you down here so you can see a little bit better. Make sure I got you nice and in view all the way, just so you get a full view of what I'm going to be looking at here. So I've tried to rinse off as much of the soil as I can on this plant, but as you can see, it had a really well developed root structure, so it still held on to quite a bit, but it is still nice. You can get in here and see pretty much exactly how big the plant is. Now this, again, is a specimen sized plant. This is one that I expect to fill in a 4-gallon bucket, to have fully mature pitchers, to probably have, I don't know, somewhere around 10 flowers next spring. So this is the biggest of the big. These are the ones that I want to grow to be really nice mother plants that everybody can see when they come out to visit. So you can see there's a ton of different growth points. So as I mentioned before, you can see I could split this into 10, mature size single growth point plants, but I do want to keep this in mother plants, so I'll probably take only about 2 divisions. We'll see what it looks like when we get down inside there, but I'll probably take 2 multiple growth point divisions just to have a backup plant in case anything happens to my mother, and then a second one to do with what I see fit. So I can trade it, I could sell it, I could just give it to a friend, whatever I want to do. But as you can see, there's plenty of places to go in here. So what I'm going to start by doing is coming over here, because you can see this growth point right here was pushing up against the edge of the pot. Remember, it was kind of starting to burrow down. So this is the main one that I want to remediate. And what you'll see if you look back here is a lot of dead rhizome that connects everything together. This is what we call the back rhizome, and I'll show you a trick you can do with this as well. But the main thing is to separate this from the back rhizome. So I can either do that with scissors or I can try and snap it with my hand. So I'm going to try and snap it. This is usually what I do. I find this is a pretty efficient way of doing it. It doesn't usually harm the plant, but if you're a little more particular, or if the plant is being stubborn, which actually I'm seeing it kind of do now, you can take scissors or a sharp knife. Of course, be careful. It is very easy to push too hard on the knife and accidentally get yourself, but you can take, I've got my big scissors here, and I'm just going to try and make a nice even cut and disturb the root system as little as possible. It's inevitable that I will disturb it somewhat by doing this, but will hopefully make the plant easier to separate. So I've cut this first growth point, and I'll pull this away. Try and kind of gently tease the roots if you can. But brand new plant right there, nice mature single growth point. That one's ready to be potted up. Probably put this in a 1-gallon pot. May flower next year. My philosophy, if this tries to flower next year, I will cut it because it's a brand new division. I want it putting its energy primarily into its roots and its rhizome. I don't want it spending energy trying to flower. If it makes leaves, that's great. That's the main thing that I want it to do. But I understand that next year this will probably take a little bit of time to recover and won't look fully 100% just yet. I apologize for the background noise. That's my exhaust fan coming on. So I'll try and speak loudly so you can hear. But now I can do something similar here. So kind of tease these roots apart. You can see just how tightly wound they can get in here. And that's why this will be good for this plant to get some fresh soil and give its roots a little bit more room to spread out. But great roots on this new division. Nice big one. You can plant that in a 1-gallon as well. And I've just created 2 new plants just like that. Okay, so I alluded to it previously. There's not a good opportunity to do this with this plant, so I'm not actually going to do it, but I am going to talk about it. I talked about the back rhizome, this part of the plant that is brown and kind of looks just like a big stem here. This is the back rhizome to the plant, which the growth points grow out from. That said, this is still a living part of the plant with a root structure. And what a lot of growers do if they are looking to propagate as much as possible and produce as many divisions as they can, you can come in here, even though this part has no growth points, and just kind of slice this back rhizome open. You can give it its own pot, and next year you'll notice some growth points will start to emerge from that. It will start very slowly. It'll probably take about at least 2 seasons for a division of this type to really reach, a decent size and look good. But it is definitely a good way to propagate, especially if you have a lot of this. You can come in here, kind of chop this all up, make nice little chunks, pot them up, and if you're patient, in a couple years you'll have a lot of great new plants. And that's really all there is to dividing the plant as far as that goes. I do need to go ahead and repot all of these, get them into their pots, but you can see my mother plant that I wanted to keep a nice specimen size is still nice and big, gonna look great next spring. It can go back in this 4-gallon pot. I can move it to the back of the pot, give it a little bit more space to fill in and spread out and grow really well next year. And I was able to generate 3 of these mature divisions with great root systems. This one actually has 2 growth points. The others only have 1, but still mature plants that I would expect to make mature sized pitchers next year. Like I said, probably try to flower. I will not let them flower, but they would if you wanted to. You can let them flower. It will take some energy. The plant probably won't look as nice, but you can definitely let them flower. And these can all go in a 1-gallon plant. So just like that, I've taken one of my large plants, I've kept a large plant. This is going to look just as nice next year. And I've generated 3 mature plants from that. So you can see when you have big mature plants like this, just how easy these are to propagate and to divide. Okay, and because I know I'm going to get questions about the repotting, I wanted to show you how I do that. To me, this is the most straightforward part of this process, but if you're intimidated and it's new, I can understand it can be overwhelming, so I'm just going to show you. So something like this, I've taken a 1-gallon pot, which is about the appropriate size for a large plant like this. It's still one growth point, but it'll fill this up in no time. So 1-gallon size pot, you can see right here. What I like to do, I take a little bit of soil, and I'll try and add at least 3 or 4 inches to the bottom. Even though these roots are deeper than this pot, I like them to be resting on the fresh soil. And what that does for me is it encourages those roots to reach down into the new soil and really anchor this plant like they're supposed to, rather than just sitting them on the bottom where they kind of have nowhere to go. I like to put them on the soil to encourage them to start kind of digging down deep in there and anchoring the plant. Once you've got it right here, again, pretty straightforward. You're just going to start tossing soil in. Make sure you balance it around. Another thing, make sure the growth point is facing out. I always put them at the back of the pot. That way they have plenty of room to grow in this direction. If you put them in the middle, it kind of means they're going to be repotted sooner. If of course you do it backwards, that's going to be a problem. They're going to be pushing up on this pot pretty soon. So make sure you give them plenty of room to spread out, because once they get grown, will grow pretty quick, especially something this size. So put it in here. You do want to pack it down, you want to make it nice and firm, but you don't want to like shove it in there and compact it like crazy. Remember, these roots need to breathe. That's the most important thing. As rain and water gets on the soil, they're pulling down oxygen and air with them. So you want to make sure that your soil is always kind of breathable. But you do want to, of course, firm it, because you don't want the plant just flopping and falling out of the pot or anything like that while it's still getting rooted. So you do want to pack it down like that, but once you get it like that, you're good to go. All right, and here is the final product. This is why I'm such an advocate of this. This is literally just a win-win for me, because I already had a really nice large mother plant. Really, it needed to be done. The only other option would have been to put it in an even bigger pot. And it's not going to get any taller or more pretty that way. It just would have continued to spread horizontally and make a bigger clump. That's definitely nice, but this is a good size for me already. I don't need it any bigger. I'm, limited on space. And I created these 3 mature plants right here that are going to be really, really nice next spring already. They're going to look great. I now have 4 versions of this plant. In a couple of years, these will probably take 3 to 4 years to reach this size if I just let them grow and don't do anything with them. So this is a big win-win, especially if you have a special plant like this. This is a really sought after, nice plant, one that was on my list for a long time, and I finally got it a few years ago, let it grow big. Now I'm able to divide it and create so much more. One other thing that I did do that I didn't get on film, I went ahead and trimmed these divisions. They just had these kind of long, lanky, non-carnivorous leaves called Phyllodia. If you leave those on the new divisions, it will cause your plant to kind of flop over if it gets windy or caught in a storm or anything like that. So I went ahead and trimmed these to be nice and neat and hopefully stay rooted a little bit better. Hope you enjoyed that part. The next thing I'm going to go through is dividing kind of other plants too. So I'll look at some other situations and walk you through just so you get a really complete view of how we do things. But this is how I would approach a mother specimen plant that I'm dividing. Last thing before I move on from super heavy veins, make sure you give your plants a really good drink of water after this. It's very important that fresh soil is still kind of dry. These are new divisions. You've just stressed out the root system, so give them a really good drink. Keep them nice and wet for a little while at least so they can get their roots going. Forgot to film that because I thought it was implied, but just make sure you give these a really good drink with the hose, put them in a tray of water, make sure they stay nice and wet for a few weeks at least.